It's a beautiful day today. It's just coming up to 9 o'clock in the morning UK time. I thought I'd go out for a little walk in the sun, as we seem to have some. It is quite chilly at the moment, but it will, I'm told, get quite a bit warmer today. And I also thought I'd take this opportunity to talk a little about sort of other writing projects. So if you've seen any of my streams, I'm towards the end now of my fourth draft of a book I'm writing called The English Hikikomori. In 2 hours time I will be live streaming me editing the 18th chapter, and there are 3 to go after that. I was doing it on a daily basis, but I kind of seem to have slunk back to every other day or every few days now, but that's fine. So there's that, which I'm currently working on. Once I've finished the 4th draft, what I intend to do is basically read all of the chapters over this as a kind of final edit, because I think it's nearly there. Certainly chapter 1, which I've worked on several times, I did do a read through last week before. Somebody had offered me some feedback on it, so I just wanted to make sure it was as good as I was going to get it, and I think I actually managed to read it without making any edits at all, which is quite unusual. That's I guess how the final read through will go. That's kind of the plan anyway. I should have done all the editing work. So once I finish the 4th draft, there will be a 5th. There wasn't going to be, but I think there will be, because what I'm going to be doing now is I've had a few people offer to kind of be beta readers and read it through. So my plan is to read it, to print it off and send it to them. So I've got some people I used to work with, somebody in my writing group. There's about 4 or 5 people who have expressed an interest in actually reading it through. So that is my plan once I finish the 4th draft, which will hopefully be in the next week or so. And then once that's happening, there won't be much I can do on that project, because obviously people, hopefully anyway, will be reading it. And I already know I need to make a minor alteration to the 1st chapter based on what I kind of thought, which was reinforced by feedback I was given when somebody read that 1st chapter for me. Anyway, so what will I be doing during that time? Well, I've got 2 other writing projects on the go. One which I started November 19, which is effectively my current draft project. So I like to have more than one thing going on at once. I like to be in the writing stage of one and the editing stage of another. And the editing stage, as I say now, is nearly done. Or certainly it'll be at a point where I can't do much more with it until I've had some feedback. So I'll go back to my other project, which I've not really discussed on this stream, which is called Empress of the Trees. Now, that's much more so. The English Hikikomori is very grounded and normal. It's just a story about somebody who's lonely and miserable and depressed and suicidal, so cheerful. But Empress of the Trees is more about, well, it's kind of bad timing really, because it's kind of about the end of the world. I was driving into work a little while back now, because I haven't worked for a while now, listening to Radio 4 on the BBC, and they did a programme about trees, and I didn't realise how much they communicated with each other. So I didn't realise that trees, for example, in Kenya, if a giraffe eats the top leaves of a tree, the trees around it will pump something mildly unpleasant tasting into the top leaves. So the giraffe goes across to the next one, they go, there, don't like that. And I think the original assumption was that this was done pheromonally, but apparently that's not the case, or they don't think that might be the case now. They've discovered that there are a big network of fungus that grow between the roots of trees called mycelia, and I think I've read somewhere that up to a third of trees' resources, sugar they've generated, actually goes into that. So kind of my what if is, what if what if there's people about to walk past me, so I'm going to try and look like I'm having a conversation with someone on FaceTime. Yeah. No, so the question was, what if they could talk and communicate through these funguses? And it's kind of believed they do. I think they believe it's some kind of natural communication system. Yeah. Yeah, so it's believed that they can send signals to each other that way. And so my kind of what if scenario was, well, what if every single tree and plant on the planet is connected through these mycelia? And what if they're effectively one enormous organism that can talk and make, well, not talk, but communicate and make decisions? And what if they're not very happy with what we humans have done to the planet? And what if they find a way of sending an ultimatum, which basically something along the lines of, you've messed up the planet, sort it out, humanity, otherwise we'll stop producing oxygen for a couple of years, you'll survive, you won't. And that's basically the scenario of the Empress of the Trees. So it's, I did a reasonable amount of research for it as well. Unusual for me, because the English hikikomori is almost completely out of my brain. I didn't really need to do any research at all. Whereas Empress of the Trees, I did look at trees in religion, because basically what I wanted to do was tie it into some myths and some legends based on trees, simply to make it seem like potentially these things have been around for such a long time, maybe they shaped those myths. So it's quite a lot of tree of life stuff in there. But the interesting thing is the way they communicate with each other. So, like I've said, they use the mycelia to do that. But also, they use people. And my main character, whose name I keep changing, was Ronnie, short for Veronica. It's now Alice, but there's a reason why has to be Veronica. So Alice is a middle name that people have adopted, is kind of the way I've gone with it. And basically it's, the opening, the prologue is her as an 8-year-old girl. Her parents join what's called a forest church. And these things are real, they actually exist. I, again, read up on it beforehand. And it tends to be still based on Christian worship. It's kind of got a hint of paganism in there as well. And they very much believe in holding services outside and stuff like that. So, yeah. So they believe in holding services outside, and it seems like a bit of reading up on it. It does feel a bit like a contradiction, because it's supposed to be about Christianity, but it's very much about outdoor worship, and it does feel quite pagan, and yet it's actually believed, again I'm reading up on this, that a lot of Christian festivals are actually pagan festivals that have just been rebranded, because it was kind of thought that if you change everything too much, people won't be interested in the new religion. So a lot of the key dates in the Christian calendar are actually pilfered from the pagan calendar, because they wanted people to adopt the new religion, but they didn't want them to have to change everything that they'd been used to, which is quite interesting. Anyway, so this young, I think she's 8 years old in the first chapter, is taken by her parents to their church, which is a forest church. And part of the initiation ceremony, and again, this actually happens, is she's blindfolded, led into the woods, and effectively introduced to a particular tree. And they've got a certain amount of time to touch the bark, and feel the shape of the tree, and then they are taken away from that point, blindfolds taken off, and they have to locate the tree. And apparently it's a very meaningful and special moment when you actually locate the tree that you were introduced to. So I thought it'd be quite cool with my character. I'll call her Ronnie because Alice really hasn't settled in my head, so I might have to go back and do a lot of find and replace. But yeah, so in the first chapter, Ronnie is taken, does all this. They lead her remote. They kind of, I think the people in the Forest Church think she's a bit young to be doing this, so they deliberately do this really convoluted back and forth route. And the tree they've selected for is actually nowhere near the point where they're all assembling. And literally, once the blindfold's off, she walks straight to it. This is my tree. And they're like, what? And she's got in her head that the tree was talking to her. And they all think she's a bit, I don't know, they're not quite sure what to make of her. Jump forward to the point where I think she's just finished her A-level, so it's probably another 10 years on. They've moved house, the family don't live in that area anymore. Her dad's a head teacher in a school is it Gloucestershire, I think they've moved to. The original tree was up sort of near Sherwood Forest. The original place they lived was near Sherwood. So they're nowhere near it now. And Ronnie's become a very kind of nature-focused girl. She's got friends, but on her own terms. She's very strong, very, very willful. She is actually kind, which sometimes goes against those other things, I think. She's got not many friends, but the friends she has got are friends for life. Yeah, but there's some weird, she finds out she's adopted on her birthday. Or is she, I can't remember. It's been a while since I wrote it, actually. So I think she maybe already knew she was adopted. I think, no, that's it. They didn't lie to her. She worked it out or whatever. And her parents haven't lied to her. They haven't tried to hide it from her. And for part of her 18th birthday, they've tried to go and find out more about her. But basically, it turns out she was a foundling. So she was a child that was found in the woods, surprisingly. And nobody has any idea who her parents actually are. And they've been back to the council. Normally with foundlings, sooner or later, you find out a bit about their history, you find out who abandoned them and all that kind of thing. And this is, again, genuinely true, but there is a percentage who never do, and they get named by the nurses who just choose a name for them. That's not the case in Ronnie's situation. But yeah, she's a foundling, so, or maybe she was, I can't remember. Anyway, so her parents say, look, we can't find out who your parents are because we don't know, we've spoken to the people at the council up back where we used to live. However, why don't you take like an ancestry type DNA test? It won't tell you who your parents were, but it'll give you a bit of background of where your genetic makeup's from and maybe give you a few ideas. And she goes, yeah, okay, that sounds cool. And so on her birthday, she does this genetic test, and her dad, being an academic, actually knows the scientist who runs the labs that does this service. So it's kind of fast-tracked, and they get a personal response. And the assumption is, initially, they get a personal response because he knows him, because her dad knows the lead scientist. But invites them up to university and says, look, the results are genuinely interesting. Come and have a look. I'll talk you through it. So they go up. I think this might be her 16th birthday rather than her 18th birthday. Actually, I think we might have 2 time jumps, one of which I've forgotten about. I've kind of forgotten exactly where it's going. But yeah, so she goes up, and the scientist basically says, these tests are amazing. So you've got what looks like parental DNA from like 2,000 years ago, before people started travelling to the degree they do now. Because most people's DNA, you'll have a percentage of this, a percentage of that. Yours is from a very specific region in, I think, Italy, and a very specific region in Scotland. And we don't understand how it's happened, because there are no 2 people left on this planet that would have that lack of genetic diversity. We don't know why it's happened. There's not much more we can do, but isn't it fascinating? And she's like, okay, who am I then? What's going on? Doesn't, again, think much more of it than that. Now, the university is close to where she used to live as a kid. So I think they take the opportunity to go and visit an old lady who is part of the forest, or was part of the forest church. That's kind of died out. People aren't meeting anymore. But there's an old lady, and I can't remember her name. It's really bad because she's one of the main characters. But they go and visit her, and she's sort of really happy to see Ronnie again and stuff like that. Jump forward a couple of years. Oh, no. I can't remember what happens next. But basically it's, because I need to reread it. I wrote about 100,000 words in November and December, and then just stopped to work on the English hikikomori. But basically, she goes to university, and she goes to university again. She doesn't need it. She's incredibly bright, but her dad pulls some strings. Well, no, I think the genetic scientist guy actually wants her in his university because he's had conversations with her. He knows she's a really smart kid, and she's interested in sort of genetics, particularly relating to plants and stuff. So she goes there, and her best mate Danny, who is this big chunky guy, who loves his computer games and stuff, goes with her, and she's always been very protective of Danny. She's kind of, he would be prime candidate for bullying at school, and like since she was 10, even when she was 10, she saw somebody start to pick on him and just wouldn't take it, wouldn't accept it, wouldn't let anybody get away with it. And so she kind of made his life a lot easier, and he's got a massive crush on her. He really finds her, he adores her basically. But she doesn't know why she feels so protective of Danny. She doesn't understand it, but it's the case. And they end up going to uni together, and they're doing similar but not identical courses. So I think she's on a 4-year course with a year studying abroad, and he's on a 3-year course. So I think they'll work together for the first 2 years, and then effectively she'll go off and do her year abroad when he's doing his final year at the uni. It's a made-up university because there wasn't one in the area that studied the kind of things that I needed them to study, so I had to invent one. Anyway, she goes back to talk to the old lady, and she does a bit of digging. She kind of, a social worker who was involved in her case when she was first discovered, when she was first found, remembers the name. It was never officially documented, but remembers the name of the person that found the baby in the woods. And it turns out it's the old lady from the forest church. She's known her for years, and she was the one who found her in the woods. So she finds that very interesting. She basically, the old lady's getting quite, she's in her 90s now, and she's struggling to look after herself really. And I think Danny drives, but Ronnie cycles a lot. Anyway, they go over to see her and are quite sort of shocked by when they visited when she was 16. The house was pristine. The old lady was running around. Her name will come back to me. Sort of running around like somebody a lot younger. Corn Dog 34, Daddy, hello. Bit worrying. Oh, hello. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm just going for a walk and telling people about my corn dog. Yeah, were you the guy we sort of talked maths homework with? Can't remember. Think so. That equation and everything. Yeah. Telling people about what? Sorry. I've just kind of got caught up with a conversation with somebody else. What was I saying that you're asking me about? Can't even read it. The sun's quite bright. Dung James. What was I? Oh, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, so she's kind of realised that the old lady that she's known since she was a kid is the person that found her as a foundling in the woods, but didn't didn't want her name to be kind of kept by the authorities. So 2 years on. So she visits when she's 16, when she's had the DNA test, and she's like, really good for an old lady in her 90s, still walking around a lot. And when they visit her 2 years later, she's really deteriorated. The house is a bit of a mess. She's really sort of struggling with lucidity and bits and pieces. And her and Danny kind of clean up, help her tidy up and get into the habit of doing shopping for her. And the old lady then sort of, I'm visiting some relatives for a few weeks, so don't worry about me, I won't be here, but I'll let you know when I'm back. And a few weeks later when they come back, she's like a new woman. Feels bad, man, for the old lady. Wow, yeah, you see, she gets better, you see. They visit her a few weeks later, and normally when you get somebody in their 90s and they start to deteriorate, that tends to mean they're potentially going to move into a care home. And Ronnie and Danny even kind of come to the conclusion that maybe she's lied to them. She's actually not going to visit family. She's actually moving out and doesn't want to admit it. Anyway, they go back and see her when she says she's back. And she's like she was a couple of years ago. She's much more sprightly. She looks a little bit younger. She's able to look after herself again. And they're like, okay. And Dung James just said, I'm currently thinking about a character idea from this Illuminati game. A guy either called Anomaly or Nobody. Oh, that could be me. That's a bit like Ronnie, actually. Anyway, so Ronnie tries to ask her about why she didn't tell anyone about what was going on. Meanwhile, Danny, there's a couple of, this is quite early in the term, meanwhile Danny is getting quite badly bullied, both physically and even sexually, by these group of girls who are in their second year at the university. They live in the same halls of residence. And there's one occasion where they set him up basically to lose his virginity, and then take photographs of him and plaster him up. Basically, they treat him really, really horribly. And Ronnie just suddenly loses a rag and just beats the crap out of the girl that was the ringleader in all of this. And she doesn't know where it's come from. She doesn't understand. She knows she's always been protective of Danny, but she doesn't know where this sudden... And she's kind of, what the hell am I doing? What's going on? And she talks to the old lady about it. And at the same time, she starts... Interesting idea. How does Anomaly Nobody sound like Ronnie? ? She doesn't. I was just talking. Well, she doesn't know her background. I presume if somebody's an anomaly or a nobody, they don't know who they are. And that's exactly Ronnie's case. She knows she's been adopted, but she doesn't know anything about who her real parents are and stuff like that. And as I say, she had this DNA test, which scientists are saying absolutely makes no sense unless her parents are like 2,000 years old. Where was I? Anyway, so she starts putting on weight. So she's always been a really active, sporty girl. When she goes to visit the old lady who lives 8 miles away, she cycles back. Interesting. The appearance for Anomaly Nobody, I imagine, would be a guy with a black jacket, jeans and a white shirt with a question mark. Oh, that sounds a little bit familiar. Well, it sounds like a cross between two different things, actually. Sounds like a cross between Christopher Eccleston's Doctor Who and a load of the ones played by earlier actors with the silly question mark motif. But anyway, I see how the name Nobody would relate. Yeah, I don't know. There is a reason for the name Ronnie, and I can't remember. Well, I can remember what it is, but I can't remember the detail because I need to go back to my notes and I'm in the middle of a wood, so I can't do that. Anyway, so Ronnie starts putting on weight for no reason, and she doesn't understand it, and she's like kind of still physically very, very fit and able. Still loves being outside. She's got a safe spot she's found in the woods near where Ursula, that's the old lady's name, Ursula, near where Ursula lives, and it's like a spot where she always sits down, and she loves drawing, so she'll draw like mushrooms and leaves and branches and stuff that she sees, because she loves the whole outdoor thing. And but she doesn't understand. She's not eating. Well, she is eating differently. Her body's telling her to eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. She just doesn't understand it, and she ends up putting on enormous amounts of weight. Nobody dares bully her about it though, because of what happened. And she's like, I don't understand why this happened. I always thought I'm so active. I always thought I'd be a skinny girl. And Danny's like, I don't care. I still think you're gorgeous. And she gets a bit down. A budding nature artist. Well, that's where she starts anyway. She gets a bit down, and kind of there was a guy that she kind of started. They never really saw each other, but she kind of liked him. And then when she put on the weight, he kind of distanced himself. And Danny's like, I don't care what you look like. I've always thought you're amazing. And they end up having a night together, which is the very first time for both of them. And then she wakes up at 4 a.m. after this has happened with not just a desire, an absolute compulsion to walk into the woods. And she doesn't understand it. She just got to go to the woods, and she doesn't know where she's going. She gets on the bike and she cycles in to the point where she can't really see what she's doing. So she ties the bike up in the car park and into the woods and just walks and walks and walks and walks and walks through the wood until she comes to a particular tree. And it's the same tree that she was introduced to at her Forest Church initiation ceremony when she was 8. And she touches the surface of the tree, and the bark looks solid, but it's kind of sticky, and she tries to pull her hand away and it won't go. So she puts her other hand to try and pull it, and her other hand gets stuck as well, basically. And slowly, over the course of like a few minutes, she's absorbed into the tree. And that's kind of the end of the first part of the book. So she is basically what's known as an ambassador of the trees. Well, I can't put my hand there because it covers there. She's an ambassador of the trees. Right, sorry. Don James put, normally nobody's thing, I imagine, would be a guy who screws up conspiracy, secret societies, and normally in wider society because he worships anarchy and sees chaos as the mother of anarchy. Are you a writer then? Because that sounds quite interesting. Like, he doesn't go up against people like the Men in Black. Oh. Doesn't just go up against it goes up against normal regular society as well, because he wants to cause anarchy. Oh, fantastic. He says he writes as a hobby. Yeah, me too. I'm not professional or anything like that, but I really enjoy doing it. That sounds really interesting. So my main character's literally been absorbed into this tree, and then she just disappears for weeks, months. Danny's kind of, oh my God, we slept together and she's vanished. What, does she think I did something I shouldn't have done? What's going on? So he's terrified. He goes to see Ursula, who's kind of, look, I've just got a feeling she'll turn up, it'll be fine. But he's like, I don't believe a word of it. And then, her parents come up to the university, and I just imagine this guy travelling all over with very few items. Yeah, it sounds interesting. So Danny's kind of doesn't know what's going on, but after a few months of her being away, the police are kind of like, she didn't have issues at home. She was a happy child. She had really good friends. Something's happened. We don't know what, but something's happened. Something bad's happened, and they, I think they officially declare her dead because she hasn't been seen by anyone for 4 months. There's absolutely no clues apart from the bike left in the woods. They scour the woods for a body, find nothing, no clues, literally no evidence that she's ever been there. So they assume she's dead. Danny kind of is absolutely distraught, and there's another girl on his university course who's someone that Ronnie knows, actually. One of the people that kind of helped when Danny was bullied in the campaign to prevent the bullying from happening. Anyway, he ends up with her, and then about 4 months later, she's suddenly found in the woods by Ursula, and she's thin again. And Ursula was clearly ready for that moment. It says, ouch, must suck to be stuck in a tree whilst people declare you dead. Yes, it does. And what's worse is when she comes out again, basically she's told, and Ursula's in on this, she's told that you were born for a very specific reason. Your parents can't know that you're still alive. She's like, that's ridiculous, I can't do that. What about Danny? And Ursula gives in and lets Danny come and say goodbye to her, which is a huge mistake. There will be consequences from that much later on. And it turns out, so Ronnie's literally, she's lost all the weight. She's been in a tree for 4 months, obviously. And this strange guy with a gun turns up at Ursula's, where she's staying, and says, right, okay, we're ready for her now. We need to, obviously the time is now, we're ready, so let's get her out of here. Ursula, you're coming with us. And they move to this guy who's called, I can't remember his name, he's kind of like a gruff, miserable, sort of sweary old man with a gun. And he takes me to this amazing house in the middle of nowhere in, I think it's Cumbria, and basically tells her that she is literally an ambassador from the trees. She was literally created using 2 sets of DNA from God knows when, that the tree, when they absorb people over the centuries to communicate with them, also registers their DNA and takes a note of the DNA, and they used the best DNA from 2 different donors effectively to create the person of the physical characteristics and the mental characteristics that they need for what's about to happen. And they're really sorry, but she was created for a purpose, and her former life means absolutely nothing now. And obviously she's like devastated what the hell's going on. And she isn't told too much initially. She's basically put up in this house is stunning. I mean, to visualize it, I actually found an amazing house online and that was on sale, and downloaded the floor plans, and it's stunning. It's like got 8 bedrooms and an annex and a underground cellar and stuff like that. Hang on. Just imagine normally nobody coming up to you in the train bus and talking to you about all the weird stuff he's experienced. Secret societies of grocery store clerks, sadistic terrorists, worshippers of cardboard boxes, etc. I've actually had that. It turned out to be a born-again Christian trying to recruit me. But so Ronnie's in this house by herself, and she's basically told, you are an ambassador of the trees, you are created by the tree. And she's like, this is bullshit. You're having me on, this is utter crap. And it's like, no, you have a very specific role. You are the interface between the trees and the government. You're going to give them demands. You're going to tell them, you're going to basically give the government an agenda, an eco-agenda, because if they don't follow it, it's the end of the world, literally. They will stop producing oxygen until humanity dies out. And she's like, oh, okay, right. And then they get a call to say that because every country, this is a worldwide thing, every single country, or it's not even every country, every area, so I think America has got several, but every country's got several of these tree-created ambassadors who are basically going to deliver the message to governments simultaneously across the world. Ronnie is the one who's going to be going to Westminster, and they get a phone call from a guy called Carruthers up in Scotland, and he's like, oh, it's all gone wrong, I need help. My ambassador's arrived, but he's not playing ball. And so they shoot up to Scotland in the car and find this lad called Mackenzie, who is effectively going to be talking to the Scottish government on behalf of the trees. But unlike Ronnie, her life has been very, very carefully shaped and guided over the 18 years. It's one of the reasons why Ursula never totally lost touch with the family. They were always aware what was going on with Veronica and shaping things where necessary to make it become the person they needed. That was Ursula's job. In Scotland, Mackenzie was Carruthers' job. It was his job to shape Mackenzie. Only Carruthers, turns out Carruthers and Ursula are over 400 years old. They were also created by the trees, but they have a different function. Their function was to shape the ambassador when they came of age, effectively. So Carruthers broke some rules. So he fell in love and got married to a normal woman, someone who wasn't going to last a long time. And when she died, it wasn't many years before Mackenzie was born, and so he took his eye off the ball. So instead of making sure that Mackenzie ended up with a nurturing family and observing him and watching him and making sure that he was ready to deliver this message, you know, he ended up being adopted by junkies and having an absolutely horrible time. So this lad who's supposed to be the ambassador for Scotland is an absolute mess. Interesting, they shake the people. Yeah, well, they need them for a specific role. So they kind of, even if it's in the background, I mean, Ronnie's parents aren't in on it. They don't know that that's what's going on. But yeah, but Mackenzie, that hasn't happened. So he's absolutely useless. But he kind of knows what's been going on, because he also had the putting on loads of weight thing. Because the putting on loads of weight thing, the tree basically gives you this compunction to put on weight until you're large enough to survive the communication process. So Ronnie doesn't remember it straight away, but as she's come out of the tree, eventually she realises she actually had quite a deep conversation with the tree, which is briefing her on her function. Mackenzie also doesn't remember it straight away, but he thinks he's basically finds himself naked in a wood being poured over by this old man, and thinks he's a paedophile and attacks him. Yeah, so they decide to do what they can with Mackenzie. They try to explain to him what's happened, what his function is, and Ronnie takes over a nurturing side again. She is a very nurturing person. One of the powers they've got is the ambassadors of the trees can sense the goodness in people. So, and I can't remember what the phrase I came for, but there was an etymological reason for it. But they can actually sense if people have a pure heart and a good soul. Because when they see them, they can see a slight glow around them. I was just thinking of a quote related to that. I made their souls into works of art. Oh, interesting. So the guys have been shaped. Oh, I've kind of lost my thread there. That's right. So Yukunda, that's the word. So basically, someone with a good soul. Both Ronnie and Mackenzie can see, and one of the first people that Ronnie notices it on is her friend Danny. She can see that he's a Yukunda. She sees this kind of like Ready Breck style glow around him, and it's quite shocking initially. So when Mackenzie first sees someone who's a Yukunda, which I think is the cook at the house, because they take everybody back to the house in Cumbria to basically train them what they need to do, knowing that Ronnie's potentially going to have to do two things at once, which is brief Scotland and England's government about what's going on. So explain why they put the weight on, explain why they have a very old DNA that makes absolutely no sense. And then the rest of the story is basically them doing their job, delivering. And this is so I've written all the bit I'm talking about now. I've actually written. It's only first draft, so it'll need a lot of playing with. The other thing so my main characters are, I'm trying to remember all them. So there's Ursula Carruthers, Ronnie Mackenzie, the house. She's not really a housemaid. The person who sort of is kind of the butler stroke whatever in the house in Cumbria is called, it'll come back to me in a moment, but they're someone who has had problems identifying with themselves. So I think they're a girl living as a boy but uses they them pronouns, and the reason I did that was I'm just trying to teach myself that not everybody considers themselves male and female, which is quite a difficult concept to get your head around. But to the people who feel that, it is absolutely legit, and I think we should respect that. So I've created this character simply to try and force myself into, thinking of he, she, they, and it isn't working very well so far, because I still kind of think of the character as female, because that's how initially they saw themselves. Got it right then though. Anyway, so what the hell is that character called? They were meant to be a background character, but they're so interesting that that they're going to be more in the story. So, for example, there's Mackenzie's just totally messed up. He wets the bed every night, and the housekeeper, they are in their mid-20s, tough as old boots in a way, sort of physically very fit, able to hold their own in a fight if they need to, sort of did martial arts and stuff, but genuinely a gentle and kind soul, hence why they're a Yukunda, hence why when Mackenzie first sees them, he's like, whoa, why are they glowing? And they're the ones who, like, Mackenzie's trying to hide the fact that he's wet the bed and does this a lot, and she kind of helps him through that, and so then they get trained up to deliver this role to government, and they've kind of realised what was supposed to be a two-pronged simultaneous thing, with Veronica or Ronnie delivering the message in Westminster and Mackenzie delivering in Holyrood. They realise that's just not going to work, because whilst Mackenzie, he's there for a few weeks doing training and stuff, he's a lot better, he's a lot more confident than he was, and the housekeeper character is a really big part of that. She really kind of looks after him and treats him kindly, which he's never had in his entire life. But they kind of realise that he's not strong enough to deliver the message by himself, so they come up with a B plan, which is basically deliver the message first thing in the morning in Westminster, then fly up on an aeroplane, and which Ronnie's going, well, hang on, we're supposed to be like delivering a message about ecology, and yet you're talking about hiring a private jet to go from London to Holyrood to deliver a message about saving the world's ecosystems. I don't think so. So she's like, I'm not getting on a plane like that. I'll go on a passenger flight. I'll go from Heathrow to wherever to Edinburgh, but I'm not going in a private plane. That kind of contradicts the message we're delivering, and I'm not being part of that. So she's very strong and causes them a lot of headaches. Anyway, so they deliver the message in Westminster. They meet a guy called Lord, and I can't remember his name, but he's kind of in the department of whatever the department is. It DEFRA? Whichever government department looks after ecology and stuff. He's like a high up member of the House of Lords who's also an advisor to this department, and it turns out he is effectively also a creature of the trees, like he's also very old, like Ursula and Carruthers, and he's effectively, over the centuries, he's the person who's put the money together, so he's kind of effectively the brains behind all of this. And he's basically very kind of down the line. Mackenzie's a liability, we just need to get rid. And the guy with the gun who I mentioned earlier, the old grumpy man, is like, look, I didn't come in this to kill people. We created this situation, we created this lad. We're not killing him, we're not, we will do what we originally planned. We will help him where we can. I'm not being part of an agenda that murders like a 19-year-old lad because we've let him down, so you can stop even thinking about that. I've got actors in my head for most of the parts, actually. So the old Lord will be Simon Callow. I wouldn't want... I don't know, anyway. So they deliver their messages. They literally fly up on a British Airways flight from Heathrow to Edinburgh, and then go to Holyrood to deliver that bit of the message there. Marianne, that's the name of the I don't want to call her a servant because she will be so much more than that, but she's the housekeeper basically. And the guy with the gun is called Mr. Oakley. That's right. It's all coming back. I haven't worked on it for ages. I've been working on my other project. So where I've written to, basically, I've written effectively to the bit where they go and deliver the messages to the government. So it can't be quite simultaneously because they have to do London first and then Glasgow. And then on the night of the delivery of the message in Scotland, Mackenzie's a bit withdrawn and weird, and says he needs to get out and clear his head. So Marianne goes with him, and he basically says, look, I've contacted my family, my brother. I can't do this, I'm not coming back. I know they won't accept that. I'm going to have to effectively disappear. Please Marianne, please don't tell them what I'm doing and why. Please just keep my secret. I just need to go. I can't, I'm not confident. I hate this. This isn't me. So he basically asks to be driven to a shopping mall, and they get caught up in traffic, and he just like literally jumps out of the car and runs. The Lord is absolutely mentally saying to Oakley, told you we should have killed him when we had the chance. And it's like, Oakley's no, we still do the right thing. However this plays out, I'm not doing that. I'm not being responsible for the death of a 19-year-old lad that, I repeat, we failed to look after. And the Lord is kind of like, well, you might need to consider your position then, because that's what should have happened. We need to be cold and clinical and unemotional about this. And that's what we needed to do in that situation, and you didn't do it. And that's what you're paid to do. So they all go back to the place in wherever it is, in not the Cotswolds, anyway, the big old house. Where did I say it was? Cumbria. Up in Scotland, Mackenzie tries to like sneak back in, but his family are like media whores, and they're just poor and want a quick buck. So they basically go to the newspapers. Oh, he's been missing for 5 or 6 months. And he's back, our darling son is back. And they do it just to sell the story, basically. The minister in Scotland sees this news report and thinks, shit, that was the guy 2 days ago that was delivering this ultimatum on behalf of the trees to me. And yet he'd disappeared. Had they kidnapped him? What the hell is going on here? So she phones her counterpart in Westminster to say, look, I want you to check the background of the person that came to talk to you, because it turns out mine has been missing for months. And he does some digging and obviously discovers that Veronica disappeared, presumed dead, a few months ago. And so the whole credibility starts to unravel. The last scene that I wrote is Veronica's struggling to sleep, so she's like having a conversation with the cleaning lady. Oh God, her name's gone from my head again. Anyway, it's just saying, this is mad. This is all going spectacularly wrong now. And then they look at the time and then realise, and trees have now switched off oxygen across the planet. It started. And basically what they're doing is to prove to the governments that they are serious, that they can stop oxygen production, is they're going to do it for a short term. Not enough to kill everybody on the planet, but enough so that scientists can detect the drop of oxygen levels in the atmosphere. And that was the last thing I wrote, basically, was Marianne and Ronnie kind of having this conversation about, oh Christ, what's going to happen now? So that's, hello G Van 64. You've just missed an amazing presentation on my new book, and it's taken me, an hour? So I'm not going to be going through it again. But yeah, that's as far in the story that I've got. Right, sorry, I don't know if Dung James is still with me, but he wrote me a big paragraph which I didn't read because I was mid-flow. So I'm imagining when Anomaly is asked why he would keep doing the stuff he does, even with the dangers and risks in this world, your people love you. If they don't love you, at least they understand you. If they don't understand you, at least they tolerate you. If they don't tolerate you, at least they fear you. Beats the straight world any day of the week. Yeah, it sounds interesting. If you're still watching, I'll be interested if you do. Gvan64, I was wondering if I have any life advice or wisdom you could share with us. Probably not. There's a missing ferret apparently. That's quite sad. Can you see that? No, I'm not very good at. A ferret called Jaws. Brilliant. I was wondering if, so you'll have to ask me, and I'll have to tell you if I think I'm qualified to give that kind of advice. But I was saying, that's where I've got to in the narrative of the book. So it's about, I would say, 50% written. The stuff I've got to write is basically the end of the world. And how, so it turns out that the trees have selected certain people to survive, and they're all Yakunda. Everyone is qualified to give wisdom. Anything you do to better yourself. Okay. yeah, so it turns out the trees have given the Yakunda the opportunity. Sorry, they've given the ambassadors the opportunity to select Yakunda. So when the world does end and the oxygen does run out, the trees can absorb. I think they've made provision for a few thousand people in an old forest up in Scotland. Again, that's another bit of the puzzle that hasn't been revealed yet. That'll be revealed in like the third act. That there's this preservation of humanity thing going on, and I think Ronnie causes a problem because she insists that Danny is one of those that's saved. I don't think everybody else is all that keen because I don't really think he's got anything to offer. But right, so that's kind of all I wanted to say for today. I didn't actually intend to be on for this long, but isn't it lovely out here today? So, Gavan64, if you want to ask any questions, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to sign off. I'll give you a moment. So that book is one I'm still writing. As soon as I've got my fourth draft of the English Hikikomori, I should go back to writing that. Realistically, I'm going to have to reread it because I've definitely forgotten some of the nuances. Cool little boardwalk now. I don't know if you can see it. Over a sort of marshy bit, although it's not very marshy at the moment. No, I don't want to walk backwards because something will go hideously wrong if I do that. Yes, I'm going to finish the fourth draft of the English Hikikomori, then go back and reread Empress of the Trees, and then basically start working on that again. Because I wrote 105,000 words in November and December, and that's got to the point where I'm at. Some of the characters are just amazing. Really like. I'm trying to remember the actor who would like to play Mr. Oakley. What's the actor's name? He's got a funny name. He was in the thick of it. He played the opposition sort of MP who became the main MP in the final series. He was also the co-pilot in the radio comedy series Cabin Pressure. And he was incredibly funny, and I can't remember the actor's name, but he's very good at playing these sort of dry, sarcastic characters, which is exactly how I see Mr. Oakley. So, okay, Gavan64, if you're not going to ask me a question, I think I'm going to sign off. I'll be back, not very long actually, I'll be back in an hour and 10 minutes to do the live edit of chapter 18 of the English Hikikomori. That will be more focused on the writing. But I've had a lovely walk and it's nice outside. So for those of you that have watched, thank you very much. Hopefully I'll see you in an hour and a bit. Bye. Oh, that's not how you turn it off. I can't work out how to stop the stream.